Here with King Shocks, and I'm here to discuss the shock package that we're in development for the 2024 INEOS Grenadier. So I'll talk about the rear suspension package. We set up a 2.5 piggy hose smooth body shock for this application. It's a piggy hose 2.5 shock with 7/8 shafts, short fin reservoirs, and compression adjusters. So out of the box, you'll see the benefits of this on the street right away. Instead of the mushy, soft, wallowy ride that you get from the stock suspension, this will give you a more compliant and responsive, like more sports car type of ride, which you'll notice a difference right out of the box on the street. But for off-road performance, that's where this thing will really shine, is the bigger 2.5 shock with the piggy hose reservoir with short fin reservoirs. It'll help with added oil capacity and heat dissipation. So you'll get optimal performance for a longer period of time without any shock fade, as compared to a lower tier shock or an OEM style shock, which isn't really meant for that type of use. So if you're going on long off-road trips, or you're driving more spiritedly or aggressively, that's where the lower tier shocks or the OEM style shocks won't just hold up to that type of use. You'll notice shock fade, and you just won't have the performance that you'll see out of this. This will maintain the optimal performance for longer periods of time. And we also offer a one-time free revalve. So if you've already maxed out your compression adjusters and it's still not enough for you, we can open up the shocks and revalve the shocks for you. Or if you have a custom setup on your rig, more weight or whatnot, we can also tune the shock to your application if you're not happy with how it's set up from the factory. So you could take advantage of that, and these, just like all of our other shocks, are a one-time purchase shock, if you will. So once they need servicing, they're completely revalvable, retunable, and we can overhaul them. Parts are readily available, so if you need any of that stuff, we could take care of it, as opposed to OEM style shock or a lower tier shock, where after they serve their time, you take them off, throw them in the trash, and you gotta buy new ones. And now moving on to the front, the shock is gonna be pretty similar to the rear shock package. It's also a 2.5 shock with 7/8 shafts with a hose remote reservoir instead, because we're able to move the reservoir up taller in this location. So the benefit of it being up, the ability of us getting it up there, is you'll have easier access to the reservoir. So if you need to make compression adjustments on it, all you got to do is get your hands in the wheel well. It's right there, easily accessible, so you can make those adjustments. Like the rears, it's also a short fin reservoir, so that'll help with heat dissipation. It's 2.5 shock, more oil capacity, remote reservoir. So just like the rears, you're gonna see optimal performance for longer periods of time. And also, like the rears, they're completely rebuildable, revalvable, retunable, and serviceable. So let's say you're out on the trail, you had a mishap, something really bad happened to where you broke a part, you bent a shaft, you broke a part off the reservoir or anything like that. We have the parts. You could just call us, or you could call your distributor, and they could get the parts from us. And the shocks are totally serviceable, so you could just send the shocks in and we'll rebuild them for you, or they'll have us rebuild it for you, and you'll get the shock sent back good as new and in optimal working condition. So also, our shocks will have bearings on the ends, on the top cap and on the rod ends. We don't use rubber bushings, which have a lot of deflection and will wear out pretty quickly. So we use bearings in them, so they're much more robust and stronger. Okay, we're at the front of the vehicle now, and here's a little comparison from the OE shock to our shock. So shock body difference, you can notice right there. OEM also uses a cheaper rubber in the pivots, so this eventually wears out over time pretty quickly, I would say. as compared to like if you're going to use a bearing or something in there, it's going to be much stronger, not have a bunch of deflection in it. So that's where you're going to see most of the difference. And then you're also going to, obviously, you don't have a remote reservoir in the OEM shock. So not only is the shock body bigger on ours for more oil capacity, but we also have a remote reservoir, which also helps with more oil capacity. Also, since this doesn't have a remote reservoir, it's going to most likely be an emulsion style shock where the nitrogen is mixed with the oil. And you just don't get as good a performance out of it as when you separate the nitrogen from the oil. So in the remote reservoir, there will be an internal floating piston, and the end side is going to be full of nitrogen. And then the rest of this area right here is going to be full of oil, as opposed to about this much oil in the shock mixed with nitrogen. You just don't get the same type of performance in an emulsion style shock. So obviously you're going to get better shock performance right out of the bat with this style setup, but it's also going to give you optimal performance for longer periods of time. And moving on to the steering stabilizer, just like our shocks, they're completely rebuildable, revalvable, so we could set up the tuning in the stabilizer however you want it. And it's obviously rebuildable, as I mentioned earlier. And that's a benefit because of how low these things hang. You could smack a rock or something with it, and with the stock one, obviously if you damage it, you're taking it off and you're buying a new stabilizer. But with ours, if you do any damage to it, just give us a call or send it in to us, and we'll rebuild it just like a new shock for you, or stabilizer for you. If you want to take it somewhere and have it done, that's also doable. Just give us a call or give one of our distributors a call, and we'll just ship the parts to you or your distributor, and you guys could take it anywhere you want to have it done. And the ends on these are also like the shocks, where they're bearings instead of cheaper rubber ends, to where you're going to have deflection. So with these, you're going to get a more solid and rigid mount, so you're going to get more response out of your steering and out of the stabilizer. Instead of the rubber ends, you're going to feel more deflection on it. And not to mention, it looks great. It looks much better. It's hanging down there, so you're going to see that nice blue and silver bling